YouTube output. That's okay.
Range Windows. There should be a way to like save an application and window configuration and just have it switch to all of those.
Yeah. We should say hello to everybody who is on early. Yeah, and it now says that we are live on YouTube, so that's good too. I'll go ahead and pull that up. YouTube. No, I should not do that there. I should do it over here. I should not lose the tabs that I need for us to be able to do the show. All right. View our channel. Is there not an indicator that we're live? That's crazy. All right.
Yeah, there
Fine.
is on YouTube
I
or on
should,
Stream
yeah, on
Plus.
YouTube. Lose the
Oh,
tabs
right.
that I need. All right. Okay. Oh, you know what I forgot to do? I forgot to get
What?
myself a drink.
Yeah, you
So
should do that.
maybe I will go do that really quickly. You can say hi to all of our fans.
Hi, fans.
I don't even know if anybody's watching
There's
right now.
I
I'll be right
don't I
back.
think there's only the two of us right now.
Yeah.
At least let me take a look at YouTube. Look at YouTube. Wow. Does that really not say how many people are watching? One watching now. That's me.
I give you access to all of the YouTube stuff, right?
Two watching now. Is that me and you?
Yes, I have it loaded up.
Switch account. Do 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 do. Okay, so our special guest is coming at
The top of the
11
hour.
at
Yep.
the top of the hour. Great.
Okay. Should kick off?
Yes, let's kick off.
Okay. Hi, Dan.
Hey, Dan. I mean, Ted.
Excellent. How are you?
I'm clearly awake
Yeah.
and completely with it. Definitely, that's me.
Yeah. I feel you on that. We flew back to the Bay Area from Ontario, and so I'm dealing with jet lag and two children under 6 and under who are jet lagged as well. So it's been
Yeah,
extra entertainment.
I bet that's totally not confusing for them at all.
They don't seem to mind. Their behavior is strange, but they don't seem to mind. Yeah. Yeah, there's been like a crazy amount of stuff that's been going on this week that I've been trying to keep tabs on, and yeah, lots of stuff to talk about.
Yeah, so what are we? Well, okay, so today we have a special guest who will be a surprise when they turn up in about half an hour.
Yes.
No clues because they don't have to be. And you just mentioned that we have that a bunch of stuff has happened
Yeah.
that we can talk about.
Yeah. Let's see. So I've got the stream up, and you have posted that we are live now, which I think is correct. And I've got this titled news something or other on YouTube, and there've been a couple of things there that I think are worth chatting about. But first, I want to talk about something that I'm glad to see come to fruition, which is no, not that. Black Sky has announced that they are starting to that their PDS is set up and rolling, and that they are going to start migrating users, Black Sky members, to their PDS, and that is awesome. this is going to be, I think, one of the first. Well, we should talk about a couple of things here. Like,
Yeah.
what is a PDS, right? I mean, I think a lot of people here know, but for other people who don't, PDS is basically the server where your data is hosted. And the interesting thing about the way that Blue Sky is architected is that you have an account on a server, and you, as a Blue Sky user, as an App Proto user, have full control over that, and you can do whatever you want with it, including take that data and move it somewhere else, and move to another
Mhm.
server. Um, and App Proto's promise is that you can have seamless account migration to another hosting provider, and there will be
Yay!
no disruption. Yeah, which is super exciting, and different than other decentralized platforms like ActivityPub and Mastodon, where you can technically migrate your account, but like, what does it mean, migrate your account? What it really means is, it's actually, the way that I would put it is, it's like uh, the transporter in Star Trek, where your account gets dematerialized and you gets materialized somewhere else, and everybody carries on pretending it's the same person.
Yes, because the old you dies. There is no reassurance whatsoever that the old you ever actually any like significant evidence that of the old you ever having existed.
That kind of depends, right? And you can leave a sort of tombstone account on. So, for example, I started my Mastodon account on Mastodon.social, and then I wanted to see what it was like to run a smaller account. So I created my own server, set up an
Yep,
account there, and I
yep,
transferred all of the people who followed me from
yes,
Mastodon.social
yes.
to my Errant Cloud account.
This is
Um,
the same way where if you use the Star Trek transporter, you are still friends with everyone
yes.
from from when you left.
Yeah. And the part there too is that I decided to leave my corpse, I guess, on Mastodon.social. So if you go to Mastodon.social slash no theory, you can find my account there. But it says, hey, this person has moved somewhere else.
But so you said that you can choose to leave a tombstone
Yeah,
with all of your old content. And I'm going to be my nitpicky lawyery person and
yeah,
say you don't actually have that choice. Your server administrator provides that choice to you
yes,
because if your server where that tombstone would be stops operating or in
that's
some
true.
of the in some of the threat scenarios is seized and taken offline, then you don't have that choice. Your only recourse is to use a tool that I'm going to guess Darius made, um, where you can publish your archive, or you can publish your data as like static HTML
Yeah,
somewhere. But there's no redirect anymore, right?
that's right.
There's no and that's why I say like in some cases, and I think this has happened to people where we've had server admin burnout, right? And they're like, I can't do this anymore. I'm turning this off.
Yeah. And
Um,
well, there's even a compact in Mastodon's documentation where if you run a server, you're supposed to agree to the Mastodon.
yep,
I think it's compact, something
yep.
a word like that, where you're supposed to give your users 3 months heads up before you shut the server down, so that they have time to migrate. And that's supposed to be a thing that all Mastodon server admins agree to.
But again, um, and I think I
That
remember
doesn't
thinking about
help
this.
in the seizure circumstance,
Right,
for example.
right. That doesn't help in the seizure example. And also, because I keep thinking about this from a practical point of view, and I know that we're talking about what ActivityPub does not do right now versus what Blue Sky, well, versus what App Proto and PDSs enable,
Yeah,
um, which is, and this is the same problem with Twitter, right? Which is, um, yes, it's decentralized in a certain way, but practically speaking, your content is inaddressable, um, and or there are no redirects from
yeah,
its previous location.
right. Yeah,
So you kind of rely on re-index it. So I am thinking out loud. So you would need to rely, or one way would be to rely on some sort of re-indexing. It's but what AT-Proto does is it lets you provably link the republished post on a different PDS against your account.
yeah.
Because
So I mean, like, this is the kind of weird part about Blue Sky migration and at Proto, where they promise that all of your data and the authenticity of that data is provable regardless of where the data
Yes.
sits.
Yeah.
And so, like, in a weird sense, publishing to ActivityPub, well, Mastodon in particular, is almost like ephemeral, right? Mastodon doesn't give a huge amount of weight to ensuring long-term access to everything that's posted across the network. Whereas at Proto has done a huge amount of work to ensure that uh, they can make platform-like guarantees, but still operate in a partly or mostly decentralized fashion, so
Right.
long as the public ledger of credentials exists. So this is all to say, like, it's kind of weird that in some ways it's not actually going to be a big deal if a whole bunch of people move from the Blue Sky PDSs to Black Sky's PDSs. It should
Right.
be, aside from a huge pain in the ass to do the migration, um, there shouldn't be a user experience difference, either from the perspective of the people who are hosted on the Black Sky
Hmm.
PDS or people who are looking at posts that are hosted on Black Sky PDSs, which I think is super cool. And so the thing that we're going to see now is, um, what are the hooks and motivations for users to move from one PDS host to another? I think Black Sky is a really compelling example of a community who's like, hey, we want to own and control our own infrastructure. We
Yep.
want to be able to set community norms and
Yep.
think about the way that we do data hosting and provisioning.
Yep.
And they are taking those first steps. And like, what's been amazing to me is watching the reactions to people
Hmm.
during this migration, because it's one thing to have arguments about what is proper decentralization with people who
Right.
are familiar with Mastodon or ActivityPub,
Yeah.
and another thing to like talk to people who think that Blue Sky is just an alternative to Twitter.
Right.
And starting this, like, I talk about Blue Sky as being a skeuomorphism
Yep.
fundamentally. Starting to incrementally introduce people to these concepts is going to be wild and I think really exciting. So Black Sky is doing that. But this PDS migration thing, they're not the only group who's been thinking about this. Excitingly, there's a project called ATP Airport, which is an alpha quality tool at the moment to help people migrate between PDSs. That's super exciting. Although Rudy's said that it's buggy enough that he's not sending users to it at the moment. Although I think it's got like both the right aesthetics and the right direction.
That is really cool.
Yeah, it's super cool. It was created by the Spark team and Roscoe in particular, who is a sort of wonderkind of the App Proto community at the moment. And there's another team, the North Sky Social team, who have been building migration tools because they are also setting up their own PDS infrastructure to host particularly the trans community, but the LGBTQIA plus community, more broadly speaking, given the consolidation of power and control of national governments and their willingness and interest in leaning on technology providers to pursue their political aims.
Yep.
So the trans community in particular is concerned about making sure that they have control and autonomy over their digital lives.
Absolutely. Yep.
And so they are also working on their own PDS hosting. They're a collective based out of Canada, and migration tools. So I'm really excited about the work that they're doing as well. And sort of getting this thing here where like we're able to actually talk about what does it meaningfully mean to run a community from a technical and policy standpoint.
Right. Right. And if I'm right, okay, so my intuition is that by having their own, by running their own PDS, by running a Black Sky PDS, Black Sky can also set up, if you're using a Black Sky built client, there's also the opportunity for a
Yeah,
Black Sky first, a Black Sky PDS kind of equivalent of a Mastodon local feed.
Yep, that's actually
Right.
exactly where they're moving to. Um,
Yeah.
and like Black Sky, I think is fascinating as this entire community and product experience that has been
Mm.
incubated inside of Blue Sky, the
Hmm.
product, and actually can use that as an on ramp to building their community and app stack.
Hmm.
And Black Sky, I think, is really people are like completely sleeping on Black Sky for a whole pile of reasons. Partly people think that it's just a feed, and I'm like, oh no, this is way more fascinating and way more complicated. But they've actually gone so far as to build an entire alternative implementation in Rust for all of the AT Proto infrastructure. So they are one of the only other teams that actually can credibly say they've actually built their entire AT Proto stack. And they are actually going to the point where they're going to release an app that people can install. You can log in to just Black
Yeah.
Sky, so
Yeah.
people who are on Black Sky actually can just use the Black Sky apps and actually
Right.
move entirely off of Blue Sky, but still connect with all of their users who are still on Blue Sky. I mean, that's the amazing part.
Yeah. This is in some ways a bit like I mentioned him already, Darius's fork um, of Mastodon, which is friend something.
Friend Camp, but it's called Hometown.
Hometown, yes. Okay. Which again is and I think has been made clear that it's not going to be merged back in, which is a kind of like a local first instance of Mastodon that I think defaults to people posting locally, and then allowing the server to integrate, being an active selective membrane with the rest of the ActivityPub/Mastodon universe. Um, I mean, I will just say it out loud. I think a lot of the I think a lot of Black Sky slipping under the radar is some implicit racism, and because it's a bunch of other people doing something elsewhere, where a bunch of stereotypically white people may not
Yeah,
notice.
I think that's part of it. I think that there's two things going on there. Some of it, and all of this I attribute to the way that Aaron Kassane talks about legibility.
Yes.
And there is the inherent racism of it all, which absolutely should not be discounted. The confusing part is I don't think that people also think about what it would mean to have a product experience inside of another product experience.
That is
Um,
pretty alien, I
yeah,
think,
well,
right
I mean,
now.
there's an attribution problem. And then the other part about it is that if you are not part of the Black Sky community, you actually can't access a bunch of the features. So,
Yeah.
for example, I was posting about Black Sky and why I thought it was exciting and using the Black Sky hashtag, and I got people used to Twitter norms
Hmm.
um, yelling at me because I did not belong in the Black Sky hashtag and I was
Yep.
posting the Black Sky hashtag.
Right.
And that misses the point in two ways, which is that if you are a member of Black Sky,
Hmm.
um, you have access to moderation tools and some feeds that they don't give out to other folks. And then also, they filter the Black Sky feed, right? It's
Hmm.
not just anything that gets posted to the Black Sky hashtag. So
Hmm.
actually, if I am not, I mean, metaphorically speaking, invited to the cookout,
Right.
then like my stuff just doesn't show up in the feed. And that I think is a new set of dynamics that people are not used to and don't see if they're not actually part of like watching the development of Black Sky and actually can see and feel that product difference.
I think another way of saying that is a lot of people don't feel like they need it because I mean the way that I look at this is marginalized communities that are under threat have the tools to or are able to create the tools that they feel like
Yeah,
they need.
yeah. Let's argue
And
about this.
honestly, right, and honestly, if you don't personally perceive the need for those types of features, then I don't think you care about them as much, even though you could benefit from them.
Yes, uh, I agree with the point and disagree with the affect in the following fashion.
Yeah, okay.
So
Look,
some of
and
this.
we're having an organic fight.
Yeah. Some of this is about the idea of like one of the ways I've seen this framed is in product development is extreme design,
Yeah.
where you try and accommodate a certain set of use cases for people who aren't in the majority. And by doing so and actually going above and beyond, you are getting to some core problems that allow you to solve whatever the issue is at a deeper layer, and that actually solves a set of problems for everybody.
Right. This is
Um,
like the pragmatic argument for accessibility when you're trying to persuade people. Right. It's not just, this isn't for disabled people.
right,
Everyone will encounter some sort of disability in their lives.
right.
Developing accommodations for those people actually will benefit everyone.
Yeah, and I think that the accessibility argument is absolutely correct, and people forget that everybody's going to get old unless you die young, right? Like,
Right. Right.
so it's worth thinking about those things. But I think that it's not fair to marginalized communities or non-majoritarian communities who do solve these problems for themselves,
Mm,
because it's not so much, and this is actually exactly some of the argument that I've got around this, which is I think it's absolutely the case and absolutely correct and right that Black Sky and North Sky are kind of leading the path on a bunch of this community work, and I
yeah.
do think it'll have consequences downstream, and it will have the things that they're thinking about and building will have an impact for more people, right? They are showing the way to the future,
Yeah.
um, but
And historically, the way that this has worked has been somewhat white savior. It's like we know better than marginalized community, and it's where we get phrases like building with and not for.
yeah, that's part of it. I would say actually, it's my argument would be that it's like far more appropriative, and people are just like, "Hey, look at what those people have done. We've done it, but better because
Right.
I'm wealthy and white."
Yeah. Yeah.
And that ends up being the pattern of the problem.
Yes.
And for that, I think that there's an attribution error, right? So, particularly being able to say those people have the right idea. I will now, because I have money and access, take their idea and apply it to everyone else, right? That's the appropriative step,
Yes.
oftentimes,
Yes.
and I think that that essentially is further marginalizing, because basically what you're saying is they had a good idea, but it wasn't quite right for everybody, right?
You're outsourcing your product development to a marginalized community.
Right. Yeah, and that I think is fundamentally the problem.
Yeah, no, that's
And
fucked up.
yeah, well, but that's also like literally what this product cycle looks like, and why I have problems with the extreme design concepts as well. Because really, what we're talking about is, hey, it's bad out there, and you know what? Certain people find the bad before other people, and maybe we should listen to those folks, right? And but not just listen, but actually like follow their lead, right? Um,
What I would say though is that though, it's not really a very big though. It's a tiny though, but I think it's a consequential one. Is that Proto was architected to enable that in the first place, as opposed to a closed platform and a closed spec.
yes,
Like you could not do that, and Facebook would prevent you from doing that. Twitter moved towards locking you down from doing that,
yeah,
right? So preventing marginalized communities or any community really from extending.
yeah. And this gets back to my like argument that Blue Sky is really two companies.
Yes.
There's Blue Sky, the
Yes.
protocol company, and then there's
Yep.
Blue Sky, the social company.
Yeah.
And um, I don't think it's entirely fair to say that they're two completely separate companies. And Paul Frazee, for example, has talked about the fact that protocols need to be developed within the context of a product. Um,
Yes. Yeah. Otherwise, you end up with top down, and then you end up with the spec that
right,
everyone agrees makes sense, but nobody actually uses.
right. Um, and so, like, some of the community things that everybody is unhappy about are things that are about the social app and not about the protocol.
Yes.
Um,
And I think and we've talked before about and I think Blue Sky, the company, the PBC, are aware of the need at some point down the road to separate out the protocol stewardship from Blue Sky, the PBC, or at least or at least have a clearer, I would say, governance structure that makes that more independent. And it's really encouraging. It'll be interesting to see the Blue Sky PBC's reaction to Black Sky, because
yeah,
Black Sky is forcing the issue, I think,
yeah,
of protocol governance versus
I think everything right now is still solidly within, but I think actually this is what you're talking about is actually a key point, which is if you want a seat at this table, what is your form of legitimacy? And mostly it is, are you building something?
Right,
Do you represent a certain user base?
right,
Or are you bringing resources, money, or particular skills to the table? Those are basically the three buckets.
right. Yeah. So this is your standard, tech industry alliance membership model, right?
Yeah.
Which for various reasons, I've been thinking about from a different point of view.
Oh,
Um, mainly from um, mainly from coordinating the interests of 50 different federal states
oh,
in working together because they do not have the time nor resource to look out for anyone other than their own, but they would significantly benefit if they found a way to work together.
yeah.
And what they would need to bring to working together. Because the equivalent there is that you have, 50 odd splintered applications in whichever domain. They would benefit from common specs. They would benefit from open specs and open
Yep.
standards.
Yep.
But no one is incentivized to do that on their own. They have a coordination problem if they all got together and there was a reason to do that, then they would all benefit from it. Um, but I think that is, and you know what, pragmatically and without a shit ton of money, um, I don't like it, but I think the Blue Sky PBC approach is right. I think it's more like it's a reality of the shitty environment that they're in, that we collectively are
Yeah.
in,
Yes.
right? That it is left to um, marginalized communities
I was with you up until that point. I
until they're
think that there's
left to.
the resourcing problem is like legit,
Right.
and I think in general in social we're in this really weird time period where like where's the innovation going to come from and innovation around what? So like the we agree that, for example, the case that you were talking about with state governments is state municipal governments. They're not going to be able to stake this. This is actually, like, weirdly speaking, the point of venture capital. And the interesting part about Blue Sky developing this protocol first in consultation, essentially being staked by Twitter,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then afterwards continuing to raise funds in order to build
Yeah.
this stuff out.
Yeah.
Then for me, the question is, what is the point of the PBC and what outcomes do they need to get to in order to meet the goals of the funders that they have picked? And that's mutual. And what is the point of community development and the open source ecosystem that needs to be built alongside the
Right.
PBC, right?
This is why there's a gut feel for me, which is that Blue Sky does at some point, if at Proto and Blue Sky are successful enough for whichever degree of sustainable plus successful plus growing means,
Yeah.
right? Then that one or the other gets spun out because they are doing different things and they're at the point where they are intertwined, but they are doing different things. Um, but part of the same ecosystem, and part of it is because they serve the protocol and the dominant application on the protocol for now have different interests, and they start to be. I feel like you need to be able to signal to anyone else if you want the protocol to succeed and grow that one manner of success is if the PBC's point, if the purpose of the PBC is to enable as much at proto use as possible because it's open and yada yada yada, right? Then at one extreme, the success is if something comes along that is bigger than Blue Sky the app and social network,
Yeah.
then you win, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me as somebody
That
who's part of
like
the community fund, the question is, how do we grow that thing? How do we either
right,
find or develop it? Is
right,
really a key and critical question. And then also, what are the dynamics around that? Because I mean, like, what does it mean to build the next app proto app, and who are the people who are going to be inclined to do that? And or other questions like, is it possible to retrofit? Um, app proto into existing apps or into existing app stacks? Because my answer to that is like kind of no. It's like hard to take an existing app and build an app proto layer to it. Which actually brings us to one of the other pieces of news, which was that Ghost announced that they are now essentially trying to show up in all social spaces,
Hmm.
which I think is
Hmm.
very cool. I took a bit of an issue with this because, like, what from a technical perspective, what Ghost has done is they've built Activity Pub integration, and that allows them to connect to Flipboard, Threads, Mastodon. Or, actually, sorry, I should say connect to Flipboard, Mastodon, WordPress. Sure, because WordPress is also building Activity Pub integration, but the Blue Sky and the Threads integration. Oh, I guess Threads actually is now federating in
Threads
part.
is federated,
Yeah,
like kind of mostly
yeah,
ish.
but Blue Sky in particular is entirely reliant actually on BridgieFed, which I think is an awesome project for a whole pile of reasons. But this actually speaks to some of the difficulty, which is like it's not trivial to uh, because that proto has a particular architecture that respects
Yeah,
user data in a particular type of way to bolt it on. And really, what you end up with is something that looks something like bridging, where like a new social is running a service that creates a PDS that translates between
yeah.
ActivityPub and a
You
new
need to,
space.
again, like this is some sort of like a version of a, again, the stuff that I've had some experience with, which is like a legacy modernization project, where you've got a system of record in one architecture,
Mm-hmm.
and you're trying to move it or keep it in, like, do you need to keep it in constant sync with another system of record that has a different architecture?
Yeah,
How often are you doing that? Are you doing that in, do you have to do that in real time? One of the things that I remember when we were talking about PDS migration and its equivalent in ActivityPub and Mastodon is that it could be seen in some ways as a feature that your data just goes away when you
yeah,
migrate. Like, one of the things that I remember thinking about when I was thinking a lot about Mastodon was the norm and the expectation that I would say kind of like the um, yeah, like, okay, so a Western Bay Area um lack of concern, or like not a need for concern about, or privilege about everything about you being online forever. Like, I don't
yeah.
care about the stuff that's online in my past, because we see a contrast with France, where with the very famous right to be forgotten legislation and everything, where, and I think it's reasonable, it is, I think it's reasonable to question the default that everything we publish must be available online forever.
The archivist in me has is torn on this, but yes, I agree.
Like, from a societal point of view, from a species point of view, yes, it would be very handy.
Yeah,
But like the balancing the rights and the interests of the individual versus the larger collective, that's I and without giving people the choice, for example.
yeah,
Because I remember there was a point where Library of Congress was archiving Twitter,
yeah.
or at least bits of it, or all of it.
So Twitter sent a big archive of like the first I don't know how many years of Twitter
Yeah,
to the Library of Congress, and then they had Firehose access for a long time. I don't
yeah.
know whether they were actually actively archiving everything, but now it's like both too big and also Elon owns it. This is the thing I was thinking about this and like, I'm really mad about, which is like actually a significant and meaningful piece of world history and world cultural uh, uh, events took place on this thing that now is owned by a dude who created a thing that called itself Mecha Hitler, right? Like that's bad.
Which
And
is why we had this, we I think we had this discussion offline, or at least not on the podcast, where I said, if I could go back in time, then I would task national archive institutions, like state archive institutions, with getting copies of everything, so that states could produce models for the benefit of
so
entities incorporated in the state,
I
because it's a state benefit.
yeah, let's underscore this a little bit more, and I think that this will transition to another thing I want to talk about too, which is that you blew my mind when you said this, which was
Yeah, I did it again.
yeah, what would happen if the Library of Congress trained its own LLM? And I was like, well, they are the people responsible for dictating what's copyright or not.
It is their job.
It's like literally their job. Like, could you create a public benefit, like not public benefit, but like literally just a commons, public commons LLM? And I think the answer to that is like probably yes. And I was thinking about that more, and I was like, how would that
Not even
be?
the LLM, maybe just the embeddings or just the data set
Yeah,
under a government mandated license, right?
yeah,
Like, and then you can solve in one fell swoop, any tax collection or any revenue collection for maintenance and develop of it.
yeah. Which is like a wild and crazy idea. And the other part to that that I was thinking about was like, how would that be meaningfully different than the way that Facebook made, from a technical perspective, meaningfully different than the way that they made Llama?
I think it
Um,
would be easier.
Maybe because if you're, I think that there's a positional thing here, which is like it was not legal for Meta to do this because they went and sucked down
Yeah,
LibGen, and just ignored everybody's
yeah.
copyrights. Although the copyrightability of all, or sorry, the use here is complicated, and copyright analysis and legal courts is complicated, and all that sort of stuff.
But
But
that's
like,
not like you said, that's not a technical issue. That is a
yeah,
societal issue.
yeah. But if you had access to all books and you could go train embeddings or whatever on that, like, why don't we have public interest data sets like this, right? I mean, like, the weather's public.
It should have been a fucking Manhattan Project.
Yeah, that would be super fucking cool.
Yeah, which is
But
why people should let me do things.
yeah, but I think also goes to some of this discussion of like what sort of tools are going to serve society best, and like how should we be thinking about some of these things in the future. And do I not have this up already? Oh yeah, I do have it up.
Andrew, our guest is going to be joining us soon. Is
Yeah,
he?
hopefully so.
Are they supposed? Are they just popping in?
No, I have not
We have to
received the
tell them.
notification to join. I've sent the
Okay,
link.
right.
Oh, actually, no, that our challenger has appeared right now.
Yes,
Hello.
Hello.
our challenger appears, and he's wearing a shirt.
Yes.
I am wearing a shirt. It says community. Oh, it's community is resistance, and yet the Zoom filters are trying to hide it.
It's almost like machine learning is thwarting your efforts to form a community of resistance.
Goodness, who'd have
Mm.
thought?
Let
Welcome.
me.
I'm here to challenge. I don't know what about, but I'm challenging.
Yes. Welcome. I guess we should introduce you first. And yes, you are a
I
challenger.
suppose.
This has been a particularly combative episode of our
Ooh.
show. Wouldn't you say, Dan?
Yes, yeah, and we didn't even plan it that way. Normally, we try to think of something to argue about, to have combat about.
Yeah. And so
Well, I'm
I'm.
happy to join, and also just realized this Zoom background looks like I've been suffering Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Yes.
But I think I'm more than 3 inches tall, but who can say on the internet?
Well,
Yes.
Anyway,
or
introduce me.
Yeah. I have actually written an introduction
What?
for you, Andrew. Which is partly like I want to. Andrew and I haven't caught up for a minute, so he started a new job since we last spoke, which is
Yeah.
that he is now a director of product, the director of product at Cal Matters, which is home to the markup, and that is my statewide news organization, and I'm very excited that
when did they
you're
when did
working
they
there.
become the home to the what they that's
Um,
new?
about two
More than
years
a
ago.
year ago? Yeah,
Oh,
year and a
okay,
half.
good.
Yeah.
They need a home.
Yes, and it's interesting for a whole pile of reasons. I mean, the tech
Yeah,
ecosystem is
there
yeah.
was tea.
Well, yes, there's that too.
Mm.
The markup has been a complicated organization to run literally since before it was officially an organization. And we can skip all the drama for the moment. And because Andrew has only just joined the drama, and I
Yes,
want to find out
yes,
more
It
about the
wasn't
drama in a
me.
minute.
yeah.
Yes. But the other reason I want interested in chatting with Andrew is that he worked at Mozilla in the past and launched and led the Coral project for a decade, like an actual
Yeah.
10 years,
Yeah.
which is an amazing run for a project that had a meaningful impact on the news industry and has
Mhm.
been open source the entire time. uh, yeah. And so I'm excited to talk about social spaces and media stuff.
Fabulous. Thank
We
you.
had who did we have on last week? Last week?
Yeah. Yes, we had
Last
Ben Wordmuller.
before that.
Yes.
Who did we
Before
have?
that, Kendra Albert, who
Albert.
Right. Okay. Yes. So, Andrew, Kendra was worried because we introduced this whole combat. This well, it's combat, and B, that we had them as a challenger appears, and they were worried about exactly how they would take part in this combat because they did not have the right name. But then I pointed out that Alpert does actually sound like some sort of medieval bludgeoning weapon. So I have decided that Lasowski sounds like a fighting technique.
Yeah.
Sure, I'll take it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Lazowski method. Yeah, I'm down with
Yeah.
that. So yeah, I've been mostly bothering Dan about let's see, I was complaining about Ghost a little bit, and then
Mm.
talking about PDS migration, but like ostensibly the thing that I wanted to talk more about was like new stuff in general. So there's a wait, Andrew, I haven't told you about this. I'm going to be in New York in 2 weeks.
Oh,
For a protocols and publishers thing. Let me drop you the link so that you can actually see this too.
oh, I already tried to sign up.
Oh, cool. Okay, great. There's a showcase, and then there's also a summit the next day, which I think your perspective would be super interesting. CC is going to come to the showcase, I believe. But if you were interested in the summit, we'd love to have you there too.
Thank you. Yeah, I filled out the form already.
Cool. All right. Good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the things that Dan and I had been chatting about was the fact that he blew my mind with this idea of like, what if the Library of Congress or the British National Library were to create an LLM or embeddings themselves? They are the arbiters of what is copyright. I'm like,
Hmm.
that's amazing, but I think that there's sort of like this broader question of what are these tools for, and like how should we be using things like AppProto or LLMs and things like MPC, MCP. And so that's like partly what the protocols for publishers conversation is going to be about. And like, it's interesting and exciting to see what people are thinking about and what sorts of product directions people are taking stuff at the moment, which is why I was chatting with you earlier this week about what Nile announced. And actually, maybe I should ask you, since you were the one who first told me about it, like, what is Vox doing, and how were you involved with it in the past, I guess, year, right?
Sure. So what we're talking about is something that launched this week on SB Nation across all 185 SB Nation sites called The Feed. And this is something that I was leading that team for about a year and a half. And I can talk a little bit about that process. But as you say, I left Vox Media about a month ago for this very exciting opportunity, so I didn't see it over the line. So I can't speak to what its launch was like, what its goals are now, if anything has changed. There's a bunch of proprietary things I probably
Yeah,
shouldn't say
absolutely.
also, but I can talk a little bit about what the thinking was and how we sort of went about it, and in a broad sense what the goals are from that.
Yeah, the thing that was remarkable to me, because I mean, you and I first started talking about this while I was working on Mozilla Social,
Yeah.
and I was curious about news organizations and their engagement with social media. Just generally speaking, as somebody who had run a the tooling platform for journalists that had a social media interface, people were publishing documents to Document Cloud and then posting them on Twitter. Um, and so I sort of had a front row seat to like how gnarly engagement looked on those platforms, but also the dynamics around why do journalists post to social media? What are the incentives and interests of news organizations, and how the dynamics in terms of the economic model were changing over that time. And so when it came to Elon acquiring Twitter and then people talking about decentralized social media like Mastodon, the really big question was, how were news organizations and journalists going to engage? Should they engage? And for Mastodon, for me, I was telling people like, you could run a Mastodon server and invite people to it, and then you're going to have a whole bunch of problems, including lots of trust and safety problems. You could run a server and just invite your employees to it in some way, people who you have some way to bind, or you could just set up an account somewhere else. But that sort of still presupposed a particular relationship between publishers and social media platforms, even if they were much smaller. And I was excited to hear what y'all were thinking about while you were at Vox and that dynamic.
Sure. Yeah, so I think there's two perspectives to take this from, the journalists and the publishers. And then of course there is also the audience and the communities, but I'll put that to one side right now in terms of why do this from a business perspective. And then we can talk about what does the audience get out of it? What's the community role in all of this and so on. Journalists love Twitter for two basic reasons. Number one, it gives them instant feedback from their audience. So they're able to, or an audience, maybe it's their audience, maybe it isn't their audience, but an audience that includes people who follow them. It gives an immediate ego boost. People who are writing journalism or doing photojournalism or video journalism, we're doing it in a way that we know we're broadcasting to the public. Like Twitter is inherently a broadcast medium. And I think it took a while for a lot of people to understand that they were broadcasting, not just commenting in a way. And so as a broadcast medium, like journalists are already ahead of that and ready to love the fact that they got all these hearts and all these replies and all this engagement and so on. So it gives them a direct access in a way that publishing an article, maybe it'll then be put in the queue, it'll be published tomorrow morning, maybe you get Chartbeat to give you some live stats, maybe you don't. You're comparing it against different things, but you're not getting direct interaction. You probably don't read the comments on your piece if there are comments on the piece, because that doesn't always go well. So you've got this much more direct engagement and this ability to have your own personality and engage with the audience. The other reason why journalists love it is because the content management systems that you use for journalism are incredibly gnarly and involve so much in order to publish. You put your text in, you put your headline in, you put your alternative headline in, you put your 5 tags in, you put the photo in, then you put your captions in. It takes so long to be able to get it to be ready to publish, where a box where is type here, hit submit, it's live is just incredibly satisfying for journalists to get to that point. And so journalists love putting things on Twitter, and publishers love the idea of reach and traffic back. But to be honest, Twitter never gave very much traffic back, and it's much decreased now. And the same for almost all the social platforms. There have been periods where Facebook gave a glut and then stopped, and then went back and then stopped. But you're entirely relying on their algorithms and how they're tweaking them. But their goal is not to send you traffic. Their goal is to keep you on their platforms.
Yeah.
And they lose money if you leave and end up on whatever news website and end up sticking there. Then that's not what they make money from. And so for the publishers to be able to own and control their own community spaces only makes sense if they can make money from it. So yes, you could set up a Mastodon server, but inserting ads into a Mastodon server in a way that advertisers would want to pay for is extremely hard or not possible in the way that's set up. You could build a whole API thing. We actually looked at this. Could we build a whole API thing to be able to insert ads into it? And we realized that very quickly our server would be blocked by various things on the network.
Absolutely,
it wouldn't be worth it. There were whole conversations about monetizing different communities that the Mastodon community I know continues to wrangle with. So when it came to what we were doing at Vox, it started out really with the way that the Verge homepage is right now, which is these sort of small quick posts things that they call them quick posts internally. I don't think that name is public viewing. It's just called the story stream. And that happened because Nilay was sick of his reporters giving Twitter all of this valuable stuff. But the reporters are like, this isn't an article. This is like 50 words saying, hey, there's a new cool trailer out. And so to create a format that would make it possible for that to have ads alongside that in a format that was their own feed on their own homepage. But the first piece was just, can we build into the CMS a faster way to publish quick articles? But that very quickly became, these are fake social objects. They look like social objects, but they don't behave like social objects. You can't follow them. You can't repost them. You can't interact with them. You can't reply to them on social spaces. And what would it look like to do that? Well, that means building an entire social platform at that point, including all the moderation pieces and so on. Doing it for the Verge first, the Verge audience is not big enough for the resources to have a whole team building that. But SB Nation's absolutely is. SB Nation remains colossal. More than a billion page views a year.
Sports makes
It
so
is
much
huge.
sense.
makes so much sense and so much money.
This is real
And
time as well.
it's real time at times. Other times it's
Oh, yeah.
asynchronous. And it also has huge traffic and very passionate communities, but individual communities. And what we realized also made sense was that it's more like a Reddit model of subreddits
Mm,
versus Twitter, where there's one space and everybody is yelling in about different things and different teams at the same time. And so that led to the site by site different feeds. There will ultimately be a place where you can combine feeds, combine different communities, follow individual player mentions, follow different posters, different things from there. Like there's whole talks about reinventing what that would look like, as well as on an app and all these things that you would expect, notifications, all these things. The platform has been designed to make that possible. And what we really were thinking about was, well, okay, how do we make it so that one platform, lots of small communities, part Reddit but part Twitter.
yeah.
Also, we played with part Discord. We tried Discord interactions. Basically, the way the platform is built, everything is a data object and which properties are put onto that, whether it's replies, whether it's posts, and those data objects can be manipulated in multiple ways. So it is relatively trivial to turn what currently looks like a forum into a live chat. And so the idea that there could be multiple formats, multiple interactions, multiple ways of doing this, and that was the starting point with ads inserted, and with an algorithm that would be ethical, with actual moderation tools from the get-go, with an actual moderation team from the get-go, who are staffers who are subject matter experts on sports because we know it's just sports, and then building it out that way. Anyway, I've been talking a lot, but that's where
No,
it all sort of came from.
you know what? This is really interesting, and it's kind of a slightly outside point, but I think it's really interesting from a broader point of view about technology, which is when Vox said that they were going to junk Chorus and then move over to WordPress,
Mhm.
which is that at the beginning of something, you need to build your own thing because you're at the beginning of that innovation and discovery curve.
Yeah.
And then at some point, right, you really need to assess whether the thing that you need is mature and honestly a commodity by then,
Mhm.
because it's going to take you a lot less time and effort to just switch over to the commodity thing.
Yeah.
And now I feel so much better about Vox having ditched Chorus and moving to WordPress because it frees up resource to do exactly this, where there are a bunch of brand new things to do, to discover, to validate, that will also differentiate Vox from anywhere else because the publishing platform plus the ad integration is like a commodity or is good enough. Like you need something else now. So I think it's a really, really great story about building something, watching it become mature, and then being able to make a strategic decision about, okay, right, we don't need to do that anymore. We need to find the next thing.
Yeah.
And then if we have used that as an opportunity to understand and retain, there's value in us having some technology capacity in-house to build the stuff that we need. But I think you rarely see that where an organization is able to switch that and they don't take that opportunity to go, oh, we don't need any in-house capacity whatsoever. We've just completely outsourced it to a third-party commodity because we're
Yeah.
just a publisher now. So I think that's
Yeah.
really, really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we had a bunch of what they called the unfair advantage in
Yes.
sort of startup land. And those for Vox were, first of all, a visionary leader with the charisma and the sort of bull in a china shopness to make it
Yeah,
happen, which is Nilay for
yeah,
sure. Like Nilay headed this up, and there's a reason why it happened because Nilay was able to, he spent more than a year trying to push for this to happen.
right.
There was also a team who had built community tools, the Coral team,
Yeah.
with myself. We knew what moderation was. We didn't have to speed learn how to do community because we've been doing it for a decade.
Yeah,
We built the platform. And so what we had was the team going, how would you build Coral today if it was disaggregated from articles and was a social network? So we had all the experience and the learnings from what we wanted to keep and what we wanted to ditch in order to build a new thing from scratch that operated in a more social way. We also had an existing large community. The hardest thing when you're building any a new community
Yeah.
platform is getting people on there. And we have a huge community right now. That's why we didn't prioritize federation from the get-go, because we didn't want to start with reach. We wanted to start with, let's not break what we have. Let's keep the communities that we have happy. And then once we get to a place where we feel they've got the feature set they need, while always keeping in the back of the mind, make sure that anything we build either can be federated or it will be separate from federation for reasons, then be able to work on the federation. And that's something that was always part of the plan and will come in order to help it get reach and to help it grow. But the first thing was like, how do we stop the traffic going down because Google Zero and all of these things? And that meant that the ambitions are not, how do we make it bigger than Twitter? Like on day one, Nilai's ambition was like, if we can get half of 1% of Twitter's ad budget, then the next meeting will be on a boat, because like it is just
Multiple
we just need a
boats.
sliver. Yeah, we just need a sliver.
Yeah.
And that means we can be more responsible with the algorithm and thinking about how we promote content. We also have experts who can be highlighted as such, who are the people who write about the sports who the audience already loves. So there's a bunch of things that already existed that meant that we were able to make better choices, and a CEO who backed it and believed in it, and backed us saying, no transphobia in this space. Like, that's a hard line. No misogyny in this space. That's a hard line. You'll get banned. And being able to like put that in the ground and say, we don't care about growth for its own sake. We're going to make a better place.
If you want to be a dick, you can always go over to Barstool.
Quite.
Yeah. You've already touched on like a bunch of the things that I was going to ask you about, but like the unfair advantage thing, I think is like really meaningful. But I was curious about. I'll ask you about the past, and then ask you also the way that you're thinking about things for the future, which is with the experience that you had building Coral, right? We talked, and I now have up on screen your quote post that says, for a bunch of, first I'll say, Ted gets it. And then for a bunch of reasons, Coral had to be built around the paradigm of articles first, no such restrictions with the new platform. Like, what opportunities did that open up in terms of starting from the ground up, right? Like the interesting part about this is articles are very much a paradigm from like literally a skeuomorphism, right? Like newspapers. But moving away from that is kind of a question of like moving to what? And, you've already mentioned a couple of things, right? We're talking about feeds, which I think is a core concept within App Proto as well. You'd mentioned a couple of different like engagement models, which are Twitter-like, Reddit-like, Discord-like. Are there other things that you thought about exploring that you thought would be worthwhile to explore if you untether yourself from articles? Like, it totally makes sense the order that you went in for thinking about this for Vox products, but like, is that it? Are there other spaces?
There's a lot of other Vox properties, and like my own personal thing, and nobody else internally seemed to get to go along with it. Was like, we should be doing this for the dodo. We should absolutely be doing this for the dodo. This should be the happiest place on the internet. Like, it should just be a whole thing of just pictures of dogs and puppies and kittens, and you can filter by animal.
There is a reason why /or is one of the biggest subreddits.
There it is. We looked at all the different social paradigms. We looked at how TikTok and live video works, although that wasn't right for a whole bunch of reasons, and not least moderation and what that means. But also, competing with TikTok is a fool's errand at this point, and so like we are ultimately a text space, and so that also is easier to moderate in different ways.
I think one of the things that you said was interesting to me, which is the way that this is architected on the back end, which I think reflects the idea that anything can be a social object, because anything can be something that people will talk about. But what are the things that more people talk about more often, which is where sports fits into it, or what are the easiest places to kind of poke through into, like, right, we've got several different criteria. Ideally, like, one thing that people like talking about is when they're all talking about it at the same time. So we've got all the water cooler moments, and we've got the bits where sports are live, and we saw evidence of the utility of that, or how much people like that on Twitter. And the other thing is that, it looks like it's architected to, from the outset, realize that anything can be a social object, whether that's a piece of video, whether the activity around that social object can also be video. Um, because in that way, you can see that there's first class support for things like clips, right? Which is something that you might see TikTok as being good at, but TikTok videos still get a shit ton of comments as well.
Yeah.
And they also have the duets and they also have the video reaction. So I thought that was an interesting thing to for you to bring up.
Yeah, for sure. And ultimately, then as people post things that are interesting, good, worth highlighting, engaging with, then we have the journalists who can engage with it. They can highlight it. They can repost it onto their own feeds. You get into it doesn't have individual feeds right now, but it doesn't seem like a massive revelation to be like people will have profile pages with a feed of the things they recommend because that's a social object. And what does it mean then to have the ability to filter by just writers on the site or your favorite writers or other things from there? You can put roles and potential properties onto all these objects, and then you can do all kinds of things that allows for select filtering or other
Yeah,
spaces or spin up a space that is made up of conversations about a certain thing. So if a player is traded from one team to another,
right.
maybe you create a feed from fans of both, labeling fans of both as being fans of both to be able to pull both in.
And
Yeah.
I think that that's also one of the things where, because for a while, and we saw this replicated on Mastodon, um, there was the experience of being on Twitter, which was on the one hand this kind of like porosity or this accidental membrane between groups of people on Twitter who would be able to find each other. But I never really experienced that through hashtags. I experienced it through finding someone and then following the people that they follow.
Yeah.
Um, but also still on a massive public forum where everyone is still broadcasting. So there was this kind of like serendipitous, you might still come across one of these other communities. Whereas Reddit is very much, allows the same thing, but kind of not, in that you still
Yeah.
have the main feed and it is still made of the communities that you subscribe to. And every so often, Reddit will inject something else that, its recommendation thinks that you might be interested in. So it is so again, it's interesting to see the approach to people's desire to meet new people, but also to talk with the people that they are already talking to.
I
What one
mean,
thing?
there's another angle on this too, which is the ability to essentially hold court and who gets to decide how to do that and when to do that. Because
Yes,
journalists right now get to do that on Twitter, or, microblogging platforms, and say, "There's a thing I want to talk about that's really
agenda
important."
setting,
Right?
right?
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. The other thing, so for my sins, I've gotten back into New York Times games. I really should give it up, and only in the last 3 months I've been doing the crossword, and I have always been doing the crossword, and I got back into spelling bee, and I occasionally stopped doing spelling bee because the editor is wrong about the words that are allowed. um, they're clearly an opinionated editor. But for the first time in the last 3 months, I started looking at the comments for each of them. And the thing that you're describing is something where there can be a crosswords community where the
Oh
crosswords
yes.
themselves are first class objects that are interactable with in the stream. You can do the crossword in the stream, you can attach the conversation to that particular crossword, and it all just works together, as opposed to, for example, the crossword that is published on a page in the New York Times CMS and it still has to use the same commenting as the CMS needs to
Yeah.
use. So
Yeah.
again,
Yeah. Sorry, go on.
no. So again, it's like it's really reinforcing this. Give people ways to talk about the things that they want to talk about, and the
Yeah.
thing is the thing they want to talk about, not the article, for example.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, games communities are huge. Crossword communities are huge. The Guardian's crossword commenting community is massive and has been for a long time and has raised money for people who are sick and in the comment space and so on. And it's a big deal within that. And I also really like how the New York Times has this spelling bee buddy, which is
Mm,
hints from the community for the words you haven't found
yeah.
yet. So it uses a combination of it knows what you found and what you haven't, and then it's pulled out the best hints, which I assume are editor chosen, and then it just supplies the ones for the ones you haven't found yet,
Yeah. I
and
looked at
credits the
that.
person who does it.
Yeah, I looked at that for the first time about 3 days ago.
Yeah,
It was really useful. I also decided
yeah,
that I was okay with not just having to come up with every I changed the rules under which I was
hmm
playing. But again, you're completely right in that that takes a relatively enlightened, which is depressing in this day and age, approach to engaging with community and actually having an opinion about it, from a product point of view. Like you say, it's like kudos to the person who came up with that, and also that they were allowed to do that.
Yeah, it was hidden for a long time as well. It was hard to get to. You had to like click on 3 links to get to Spelling Bee Buddy. They've just added to the Games app, I
Mm.
think, a link to the community now, but it was always
Yes, yeah,
kind of
that might,
hidden.
yeah.
Yeah, they added sort of a light bulb thing just the other day that probably highlights it a lot more. But the crosswords have always had this thing because like Winna Lou, who writes the connections, she got involved with New York Times Games because she used to send in crossword puzzles for them to publish
Yeah.
as a reader, and then they picked some of them up. Like that's how you start if you want to be a puzzler. You come up with your own crossword puzzles, you send them into the Times unsolicited. If they like them, they'll pick them, and then they might hire you. And she became a part of the team.
This is and you know this is kind of classic internet, which is the way into most digital publishing or digital content industries, which is when you have the opportunity to also make your own version of the thing, then you publish that version of the thing, and then it gets spotted, and the smart employers or the smart publishers, take advantage of that, and that's how you get the pipeline of, I made a Team Fortress level. Now I'm doing, now I work at
Well,
Valve.
this is really
Yeah.
one of the core parts about, again, what is the purpose of community,
Mhm.
and the legitimacy that your thing has based on who it serves. And part of that is a discussion about like journalism writ large, but it's actually like literally any social product. And like I think about this coming back to Andrew. We were talking about Black Sky and North Sky and sort of community led and driven development, and that is actually the pattern that we should replicate and see more people trying to follow. So it's also like fun and interesting to see the way that y'all approached this at Vox, while you're there. I'm also super curious about the way that you're thinking about this when it comes to your work in your new role and
Let's
Cal
talk about
Matters.
Andrew's new job.
Yeah, if you're up
Um,
for it. Like you've only been there for a little while.
Sure.
So.
So first, just a note about Rudy and Black Sky and the amazing work they're doing. I mean, the especially Black communities on the internet have always not got the kudos that they deserve. Like when we look back at things like Black Planet and the amazing communities that they built up in early internet, and how that's often missed out in the histories of social internet. And these are definitely things that we've been very aware of
Even
and watching
Vine, right?
closely. Yeah, and Vine as well, absolutely. And that's always been a huge part of it, and some of that is because of the mainstream platforms and their biases and which voices get prioritized, and then of course they end up often borrowing, stealing a lot of the ideas that then develop, and sort of mainstreaming from there. But as for my current job, it's very different, and that's by design. Like I am fascinated with and will continue to be involved in online community software and protocols and moderation principles and so on. And I wanted to have a different kind of experience where I'm building tools for different communities in a nonprofit news space
Nice.
that allows me to engage in different ways. So a lot of people have said, "Oh, you're going to be putting Coral and Cal Matters articles." I'm like, I don't think that's the right move. Like, I don't think they need it. Like, that's not what they're there for. I mean, maybe at some point, but I had a meeting today where someone was asking, well, what's the right tool to engage with an audience who we're not getting? I'm like, well, the right tool is to go and set up a table at a space where they are and chat to them,
Right.
and let's do more of that. Let's be engaged in a much bigger way. And it's very different being at a non-profit news site than a for-profit, because the for-profit goal is to bring people to the page, get them engaged, make them want to stay, make them want to come back, build a long-term relationship. And while that does exist in nonprofit news, and we do have memberships and become a member. There is also the ability to say, we're going to build a tool that is for one specific underserved audience based on a data set we've got. So, for example, this is before I joined, CalMat has put together an amazing data set of all the career colleges in California. So if you go to be a hairdresser or a plumber or electrician, these career colleges, most of which don't require any kind of licensing or registration, and many of which have lawsuits against them for unsafe practices,
Mm,
fraud, places like they're not delivering the students what they promised, like all these
mm,
different things. And so they made one big database out of this and a searchable database. And the right community for that, the right audience for that, are probably not Cal Matters readers. They're people who
Yeah.
go from high school into a career college. And so if they come and use that tool and then leave, don't care what Cal Matters is, don't know, never come back again. That's a win because we have funders who care about the difference that we're making in their lives. We
Right.
don't have to, it's not, everything is not an opportunity for a funnel. Some things can just be an opportunity to build a tool that has a direct impact to improve people's lives. And that's just because it's nonprofit that allows us to do that. And I'm just excited to be in a different mindset of building right now and serving a much wider range of communities in
Yeah.
that way.
I want to tie those two things together.
Yeah.
I'll try and quickly do that, which is Black Sky and North Sky are examples of, you can draw a direct line to them by, understanding and meeting a user need. The users in this case are, and, traditional, graybeard Unix people should understand this, and Hacker News should understand this because it is scratching the itch, right? The itch that you have is you are a marginalized and minority community and you need tools to protect yourself. It's just that a bunch of people who are used to saying, "Oh yeah, no, totally," you just build a thing that scratches your own itch, and then that happens to, scratch a whole bunch of other people's itches. Like you're saying now, it's the okay, well, that's expanding now, or the environment is different, so so that those things are more viable or have more chances to sustain and thrive. The other thing is that the non-profit part, what Cal Matters, the organization, is doing is service journalism, and it's able to do service journalism because in a for-profit newsroom or brand, then your service journalism will always be subservient to, right, well, we're a publisher, we need to build our brand so that we can sell ads, so that all of this stuff. And exactly the thing that you're saying about, well, you go out, you find a bunch of users, you find out what they need, and then you figure out if you can build that. You try to build something that meets their needs.
Yeah. And like for-profit journalism will super serve service journalism to people wealthy enough to buy subscriptions.
Yeah.
And so that means
this comes back to another thing that we touched on earlier before you joined, Andrew, which was just like actually thinking about what are the economic models and what are the incentives that are inherent in that. And Dan was mentioning that there's an analogous space in terms of trying to get states to coordinate standards, and the fact that I'm like, yeah, like if you think about it, App Proto exists primarily because of venture capital, like being staked by Twitter first and then venture capital. And that's kind of what venture capital is for, making things in a speculative way. But then actually the interesting part is what gets built on top of that. Where else are they going to find community? And this was the thing that I was going to notice and sort of ranted about earlier this week, which is like, there are a lot of people who there are a lot of stories that get written about Blue Sky and the fact that like growth has like leveled off. And people just being like, no, these people are all haters. And I'm like, no, there are a lot of haters out there, and there have been a tremendous number of bad takes about Blue Sky, but like growth actually has leveled off. And
the rate of growth has leveled off. It is still growing.
That's right. And that's like actually a thing that people should talk about. And part of this is actually the intentionality of growth and like not being caught in a dichotomy between hyper growth forever or everything is fine the way that it is. And like, what are the incremental, like, where are you going to go meet people and meet them where they're at? And what sorts of things can we build, or that App Proto needs, just generally speaking, to figure out figure out what sorts of tools built in App Proto can serve communities in meaningful ways, right?
So let me see if sorry, Andrew, go ahead.
No. I was just going to say that there's a few things that within this that we just, first of all, we don't have anything that we can compare it with Facebook and Twitter because those numbers are private. So we don't know if this is a normal part of the cycle or not because we just don't know. And secondly, Blue Sky is not engaging in dark patterns in order to juice growth. So if you remember early on, like Facebook grew because you got thousands of emails going, your contacts, because Facebook forced you to upload your contacts or tricked you into uploading your contacts, and it would email everyone going, your friends on Facebook and they're talking about stuff, maybe it's you, find out. And then Twitter is now saying, oh, we're not going to show you this tweet until you log in, and that wasn't user chosen, which Blue Sky does do, but is just a default in order to, or we're not going to show you the replies or whatever else, we're not going to show you the timeline in chronological order in order to force you into that situation. So there's also some growth hacking that they don't want to do, and I think that's good, but does limit growth.
Yeah. Ted, we kind of touched on this earlier, which is um, it is easy to write stories about blue sky floundering, right? Um, there is a potential future where black sky does really, really well, like really well, because there is a whole community out there and that it can meet and it can grow over time and it can credibly meet that community's needs in ways that aren't met elsewhere. And that can happen at the same time as blue sky being
Yeah.
seen to fail, right? And black sky might never be, and right. So at
Well,
that
no.
point,
Let's talk about that and what success or failure means, because I think it's much more
Mhm,
complicated.
yes,
mhm,
yeah.
mhm.
But then you can easily see stories where it's like, okay, well, blue sky is failing, but is what blue sky the PBC tried to do succeeding because the aggregate number of users on App Proto are increasing? I would say, yeah, that was the entire point, right? But that that's a nuanced
Well,
position that I think people aren't. It would be like a story right now saying HTTP is going great. Oh,
yeah.
actually, no, I digress. It's more. It would be more like more recently something like everything's going to be on blockchain. The more applications on blockchain, the better. Blockchain is succeeding because look at all these blockchain companies. So in terms of winning the perception war, unfortunately, that might be that's how you win the protocol. Is thriving percent, which Ted, you've been talking about the whole time, which is like we need a whole shit ton of stuff on our proto.
Yeah, yeah, and I think Anuja's point here is important, which is like Black Sky is actually building a whole bunch of things, and I think that's true for Blue Sky. And some of this is my whole thing about Blue Sky is people don't know what to make of it and whether it is just a social app or whether it's something more. And there's, I think, um, unintentional confusion and to some extent maybe some intentional confusion about that. And I think of this as like it's basically a piece of anamorphic art, and like if you look at it from one particular angle it looks like Twitter, and once you start to move off axis things start to get really weird, and the question is can you make it look like other pictures. And some of this is coming back to the legibility point. What metrics is Blue Sky being judged by, and is it the social media growth numbers, which is kind of what they're being hit for? Is it an ecosystem play? And then ultimately, if you're thinking about this from the funder's perspective, how are they going to monetize all of the infrastructure that they've built and the communities that they've built in a way that allows, at the very least, for Blue Sky to be self-sustaining and ideally to produce multiples? And then how does that interact with other sorts of things like Black Sky existing, right? Because you could see a world in which both Blue Sky and Black Sky are going out to funders and asking for funding for essentially access to the same user base. And maybe that's good. Maybe that's not good, right? And some of that's going to depend on storytelling. It's going to depend on the perspective of potential funders and what kind of outcomes we can get to. And some of it's about actually what metrics do we pick. So like Blue Sky, I know for a fact, are just like, actually, we account all at Proto accounts as
Mm.
part of our numbers
Yeah.
and our activity, which I think is correct. But I want the ecosystem to go to a point where it's not correct.
Yes.
And then the question is really, what does Blue Sky see itself as? Does it see itself as a microblogging platform primarily? Do they see themselves as, I don't know, infrastructure providers or something like that? And how they expect to help other people grow in that ecosystem, or what sorts of business models can they approach? But some of this is still like everything else is so small that we can't even like really have this conversation in a meaningful way yet.
Yeah, this is like birth of the universe.
Yeah,
Everything's opaque. We don't know the patterns that
yeah,
everything is going to collapse into and plump into.
yeah, yeah. And some of this is like, Anuja's listening in from a new social, like the biggest PDS provider on Blue Sky or on App Proto that is not Blue Sky is a new social in BridgeFed right now. And that's like actually remarkable and super interesting to think about. And maybe Black Sky gets to be the second, or maybe they get to be larger, right? I think that there's like 50,000 ish accounts being bridged right now.
Mm-hmm.
And So what does it look like, and what does it mean once we get to that point? I think that this is particularly interesting in Bridgefed's case because they're not traditional at proto accounts, right? I think maybe you can migrate your account in or out of Bridgefed, but like, what does that
Let's
kind of
have them
mean over
on.
time
Yeah,
too?
yeah.
Yeah, so maybe we should talk to Ryan and
Yeah,
you sometime soon.
yeah, yeah. We should talk to them about that. I mean, I think, from the business or the strategy point,
Yeah.
right? Uh, the Blue Sky PBC story changes over time, because its goals are going to change over time. Right now, I do not fault it whatsoever. Okay, for presenting as a social network, as a Twitter skeuomorph, which means it's going to be compared against that, which
Yeah.
explains why they are including every single @proto account in their user numbers, because that's what they have to do right now. Because I wouldn't be surprised if the strategy is we need to grow a thing as big as possible, right? And some of that may be with the lowest barrier to entry as possible, with the easiest possible to access community, to make it a bit like a blockchain situation where other people will say, oh, I need to jump in to get onto some of that, right?
Yep.
Like, now I understand that this is a protocol and not an application. And I think it's absolutely fine for it to be confused, provided the right audiences understand. There is absolutely the people who only need to understand, and this is going to be mercenary, that Blue Sky is a social network,
Yeah.
because, right, that's a valid need. We need those numbers to be as big as possible. They don't need right now to be able to understand, or they don't have a need that can be satisfied by other protocol applications.
Yeah, I've got a corollary thought to that, which is that, and my thoughts recently have been that we shouldn't, like, talking about app proto as a protocol is actually kind of a mistake. And what we should be talking about is that it's a technology the same way that the web is a technology,
Yes.
and that it is composed of actually other pieces that can be mixed and matched. And again, can be composed into a picture of a bird, but actually could be mixed and matched to make other pictures too.
Which is unfortunately a way that it is comparable to the blockchain example.
I don't necessarily. Um, I like to think of App Proto as a technological successor to a lot of the blockchain conversations without the baggage.
Oh yeah, no. So by that I mean positioned as Web 3.0,
Yeah.
a new stack of technologies that enables a new form of application
Yes.
in a new way.
Yeah.
So by that I mean, more kind of platform for
Yeah.
other people to build stuff on,
Yep.
which is more expansive than just the protocol behind it.
Yeah, and I was going to say, to that end, I wonder if another way of thinking about it, or thinking about its potential, is as a social operating system.
Yeah.
So if you look at every single app on your phone and think, what would it mean for this to be connected to an ecosystem, either a private ecosystem, so now I can generate notifications for myself using a bot that would act like a social bot, but I'm calling it and having conversations to give me a notification, or what would it look like to then engage other people in the conversation, have them connected, be able to follow what they're doing, or share what I'm doing? Like, what does it look like to make it a social layer? And all of the different pieces and objects, like the data object, all the different properties. What are all the properties you could do, and what would that enable? And just app by app, like, I'm sure we could think about a dozen things on everything now, and if you look at it through that lens.
Yeah, I think that is an amazing framing, and I'm going to think about that a whole lot more.
I have one quick thing to add to that, which is I don't think that will succeed without significant privacy measures built in that don't exist right now, because
Agreed.
Including private data.
Well, by that I mean private data, because it comes up against what's happening in the other half of all of this, which is AI.
Right. Yeah.
And Gen AI, which is going to rely on access to data and being able to control who you give and what you give access to that data.
Yes.
So being able to have that fine grain, like, you need that. Arguably, that's the other half, and that might be a pitch that I'd be making right now, which is that the social operating system will turbocharge, the AI revolution, and is critical to it.
That is exactly what I'm thinking about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and some of the conversation around the protocols for publishers. I am going to be in New York in a couple of weeks. Andrew, I will drop you a line about that. We should probably wrap up. You told me that you've got a call at the top of the hour, so we should...
I do, but y'all should carry on if you need the challenger can leave. I don't know whether defeated or victorious, but
You definitely landed a lot of interesting points. So thank you. Appreciate it.
I
And
would say the challenger succeeded.
yeah, yes.
well,
There you go.
I could ask nothing more than that. Wonderful to see you both. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah,
Okay.
Thanks
for
very much,
coming.
Andrew.
Yeah. Cheers. I need to go rescue my wife from one of my children. And Dan, it was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Yeah.
And we will talk again next week.